I'd like to go ahead and call this February 10th, 2020 special call board meeting, work session, and closed meeting for personnel and acquisition of real property to order. Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Ritchie.
Present.
Mrs. Smith.
Present.
Mrs. Bailey.
Present.
Mr. Palmer.
Present.
Mr. Campbell is absent. Mrs. Garner.
Present.
Mr. Allgood.
Present.
Mr. Edwards.
Yes. Present.
Mr. Honeycutt.
Present. Can I get a motion that we adopt the agenda for the special called school board meeting and work session and closed meeting for personnel and acquisition of real property?
So moved.
Second.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that we've got a couple of action items.
Yes, ma'am.
And part of our report preparing for the merger of secondary schools has that need my transcript information. I wonder if we couldn't go ahead and add that to action tonight, since we've already got two other action items.
Okay.
Just to go ahead and, because that's kind of been hanging out there for a while now.
Okay. And Ms. Hendrick, yes, Ms. Hendrick is here this evening.
I mean, I'm bringing that up. I'd like to add it, and if anybody wants to second it, that's fine. If not, we can just wait till before.
Okay, so I have a motion to amend the agenda to include need my transcripts. Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mrs. Smith. We're going to vote on roll call now on the amended agenda to include need my transcript, which will be an action item. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Present.
Yes.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mrs. Garner.
Yes.
Mr. Allgood.
Yes.
Mr. Edwards.
Abstain.
Mr. Honeycutt.
Yes. All right, and without further ado, Mr. Superintendent, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We've asked for this meeting tonight because there are items, as we are making significant transition to the new school, that we've had some committee meetings and reports on. And sometimes it's good to have an opportunity to have the board time to discuss these items. Mine is on. Okay. And so we thought we would take the time tonight to going over some of the issues related to the profile of a Mecklenburg graduate, some of those transitions, as well as the budget, and then begin to have a chance to look at the new procedural manuals that have been put together and talk about some of these issues. Some of these will be in open public meeting. There are some that would require a closed session talking about property and things of that nature. So we're going to start with those discussions for the open meeting and looking first of all at the preparing for the merger of the profile of a Mecklenburg graduate. And the first item that I'd like to bring our attention to has to do with some information about the innovation grant that the school has gotten. We had a meeting of the instructional committee last week that had an opportunity to sit down with the principals, representatives from the two middle schools and the two high schools to talk about several of these issues. And they will be coming some components of that to the board at our meeting for some discussion and possibly some voting on those things. So I wanted to have an opportunity tonight to bring some of the primary components of that to the board's attention for some discussion, and also give the members of the committee an opportunity to bring their thoughts, having heard the responses from our teachers and our principals about it. As you know, at the high school in particular, we've been looking at the whole issue of the development of the 6 career academies and pushing our students, particularly those that are going to be graduating in 2 years. They will be looking at a different diploma. The diploma types that they will be going after are infused with the career projections in mind, or their career plans in mind into the future. We've been building on this as we've been looking at the development of the new high school. We had been a part of the Virginia is for Learners first cohort We found that, in fact, we are in advance of what most of the schools and divisions in the state that were a part of that cohort were looking for, and we didn't find that to be as beneficial to us. But this innovation grant that we have gotten, along with Halifax County Schools and then too in Henrico County, has been very beneficial because it's given a lot of professional development to some of our teachers and given them a plan or an opportunity to plan for the shift to the academy approach as we go along. And we do want these things to be coming in large part from the ground up as opposed to from the top down. So they led a discussion in our committee meeting about the 3 areas that have been focused on. The first of them being the whole idea of working with the classes and the students in some blended learning opportunities, blending the classes. The ultimate goal of the state with the blended learning is the idea that when you look only at graduation requirements, students can finish their math and their science specifically courses by the end of the 9th or 10th grade, depending on the diploma that they're looking at, and have no more direct access to math or science before they would move on after graduation into college. And their brains atrophy related to those, and it doesn't help them. And that's how you get to the place where, although they've had how to read fractions and deal with things of that nature, read a ruler, deal with fractions, they don't remember them. And so there's a goal of the state to try to work with us in creating a scenario where the CTE programs and the math, science, English, and so forth can be blended, and they can continue to get credit for those as we move along. Now, in proposing that to our schools, Parkview has a team, and Bluestone has a team that's been working on it. And the teachers in particular, I can say, have picked up on the idea of blending classes. The first classes that they've identified for working in this direction are not yet at the place where we are looking to move to. They're not really blending the math or science with CTE. But they're establishing a pathway, basically, is what they're doing. And so we will need to, at some point, have a vote on, and they'll have a presentation to make at the February meeting on what they're looking at doing. Now, one of the reasons it came up as a question is because you, the board, have really been anxious to see that if there's a class at one school, there's a class of similar type at the other, that they're equal. But what they're looking at are different classes. One is looking at an English class, English 12, that is going to be working in conjunction with the photojournalism and really doing a lot of outreach into the community. The other one's looking, what seems like a bit of a strange, but they've got their reasons for wanting to do this. Bluestone is looking at a combination of biology and psychology. And so I support the ideas of both of them because it's, again, getting them started from the ground level and working, seeing how these things would work out. So I will let the committee speak for itself as this question came up, but we addressed the concern, well, we might have one at one and one at the other and not equal, but because they're pilot classes, there seemed to be a sense that it would be good for them to have that opportunity to move forward with that. So as you see that presented at the February meeting, then you'll have a chance to make up your own mind about that. But I would like to ask Ms. Garner and Ms. Bailey if they would comment on their thoughts as they were presented.
Well, I know that if you can get to, thank you, if you can get to Parkview Thursday night, they're going to have a demonstration of the English photo combination. I got the impression from last week's meeting that Bluestone had not yet completed that curriculum.
No, they're both going to an actual curriculum writing part of the innovation grant so that they can make sure that it crosses every T and dots every I as far as the Department of Education is concerned with this. And none of it can be completed until they've both gone through that, but both of them have started on the process, yes. And they know what they want.
It looked like Parkview had gotten a little bit further ahead, but listening to both of them, I think it's going to be a good program that they've got 2 classes and they will get 2 credits. So if you get an opportunity to go by Parkview Thursday night, because I do know that they're going to have a demonstration. I talked to Dominique about that.
Right. One of the things that is very beneficial about that is they've already gotten in touch with radio stations and looking at putting together video that can be broadcast locally and learning those aspects of it, which could be very beneficial for the school as well as the student.
Ms. Bailey, you're on that committee as well. Have you got anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think it's important that we're, as Mr. Nichols said, this is a ground-up type thing. I mean, each school has to do what is good for that school. And if they have, and the other part of it is that the teachers have to want to do it. And so these particular teachers that presented to us, I mean, they're the ones, this is their idea. And because you can't really, I mean, because it's brand new and nobody's ever done it before, there has to be some excitement on the part of the staff.
Right.
To kind of be creative and to think out of the box and to kind of run with it. I mean, that's why it's a grant. And it's also, I think that's why it's a grant. Richmond wants some new ideas. And that's how they come. They come from teachers. They don't come from Richmond. So I think that because it's a pilot, you know, the pilot means that it may work, but it's also that it may not. So we take a chance when we do these things, but I think it's important to do that at times so that we can develop and we can get better and we can learn from those things. And both schools do want to offer a leadership class as well.
Right.
So that class would be the same on both ends, and that would be available to, I think it was juniors and seniors, wasn't it, Ms. Garner?
Was it just juniors and seniors?
I think.
It was all the juniors and seniors.
Yeah,
And it-
so,
it-
and then I think that would be really helpful for any child to get involved in a leadership class and, you know, what it takes to be a leader and to be a manager and to, that kind of thing. So,
And that'll be part of the presentation when they come to the whole full board.
Now, the combination classes were just the ones they picked for this one. They had other ideas, which I liked a whole lot better. One was ag, culinary arts,
yeah.
working together. Now, that one would interest me more than either one of the 2 here. So there are other combinations, but these are the ones that they're starting with, to see how they go.
Exactly. And I think the other part of that is too, that one of those credits, as they blend that, one of them is kind of a core class. So in the biology psych, the biology is the core class, because psych's typically an elective, and then on the other side, the English was the core class. So they're kind of combining some fun stuff with the with the core
Well, it's
stuff.
more hands-on into the core academic.
Sure.
class.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So we have students, there are 2 different classes, one at Bluestone, one at Parkview. So what happens when 3 kids from Parkview, their parents move to Bluestone in the middle of the year, and they're taking biology down at Parkview, and now they're moving to Bluestone, and they're in this class? What do? Just drop the class, or do they, we're not equal again, so therefore, the kids can't transfer back and forth, and we have a lot of that because we have parents that move all the time.
Really?
Yes,
Sure.
for a lot of reasons. A lot of parents,
Well,
especially in some of the behavioral problems we have with kids, you know, they leave a parent and live with a grandparent on the other end of the county, and if they're in the middle of this class, that's the reason I've always preached equal everywhere. So if we should have the same curriculum. We're getting ready to build one school, but yet we're splitting curriculum again.
well, this is just two classes.
I know,
Mr.
but who
Edwards.
loses on our pilot?
Well, the thing is this, that if a child is in that class, it's only going to be 25 of them at Bluestone. 25 of, that was the maximum class size, as I recall. And at Parkview, I think it was double that because they had more students to do that, right? Is that how it was? I don't even remember. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is we're talking about 25 kids. If one of them is one of those that is moving, then we would have to do what we would have to do to accommodate that child. If it was transporting them for that block, or, I think we would make it happen until the end of the semester, or until the end of the year.
Regular biology class?
Well, no, because
It's biology
it's
too,
blended.
biology two with psych. And the way they talked about it, Parkview,
Ain't no
they would
answer
do the
for it.
English class one day and the
They were
photo
go-
one day.
Well,
And-
that's,
And work.
Well, I want to interject. Folks, we don't want to get back into that same thing we just left from, okay? I agree with Mr. Edwards. We're talking about having one school pretty soon here. So let's not get too far. This is just my opinion. I'm only one vote. But we sat here in this meeting and we argued the point last so often, I put it that way. And we went on and on and on about let's making it the same, let's make it the same. Now we're back saying, well, let's not make it same, let's throw in something extra. Regardless of whether it's a beginning, whether it's a pilot, or whether it is one that has been around for a while, if it's separate or if it's different, it's different. As simple as that. It's just my opinion. Take it and run with it, one way or the other. I'll make my vote just like everybody else would make theirs, but I agree with Mr. Edwards, we need to be careful.
Mr. Nichols?
Well, I certainly am most anxious when we get into the new school that we have the opportunity to have the blended learnings for the CTE and with the academics, because I know what happens when students don't have math or science for a number of years, and I also know that in our CTE classes, there's a significant amount of chemistry and the math that they need, and I think the students should get the opportunity to do it.
So would that be your recommendation to the board, that we move forward with the blended classes?
I think we need to move forward with the blended classes. I think if the board has some reservations about having something different, we can have a conversation with the schools about can we find some way of having something similar at both ends.
Yeah, why couldn't they just have the same blended class?
Right.
Now, that
Well,
would work.
Part of that is simply because we're looking at getting this early on teacher buy-in, and the teachers came up with at the different schools came up with different recommendations.
So, question. So in the middle of the year, one of your teachers decides she wants to transfer to Bluestone. She's teaching a class over on the other end of the county. Now what do you do? I'm just bringing up, I'm telling you, these
Don't let
things
them
happen.
transfer.
We're not gonna let her transfer.
Yeah, so she'll quit and go to Lunenburg. I'm just,
Charles would appreciate that.
Well, and part of the answer is, as was mentioned, there is a core academic class involved, and then there is an elective. And so we would know that the core academic class is available on both ends. And I happen to know that the elective course is also available on both ends. They just haven't talked about blending them in some type of way. So we can consider it. I mean, that's what we're here is to talk about. We can still consider it. We can bring it back and give you a chance to think about it that night. It doesn't have to be decided on it at this meeting.
And again, this is for information tonight.
This is for information.
And
tonight
we will
for
have
the
a presentation from the teachers or from someone
Yes.
at our meeting next week. And at that point, we will have the opportunity to vote.
It doesn't have to be voted on. And
I think it's important also to think about that this is grant money, and this is an aspect of the grant that has to be fulfilled.
but it
So-
can be fulfilled
It can.
on
And
both ends of the county the same.
And that's
still-
exactly what I was just getting ready to say.
Thank you.
It can be fulfilled that way, but we want it to be successful. And we want people teaching these blended classes that want to do that. So, because you teachers in the room, if it's something that you really don't want to do, you're not going to be real excited about doing it. So,
Music appreciation.
so maybe Mr. Nichols can, between now and when we have to vote on this, have a conversation with those people in the buildings that we might ask to do this.
Yeah, and that's another reason for bringing it up at a work session, is to have the opportunity to take what
Can I
I'm
ask
hearing from the
you a
board.
question?
Yes,
before
sir.
we get through this? By being a pilot program and it's funded through the state, you're saying, how many years are they funding this pilot program? Is this a 1 year at a time thing?
Well, the funding No, this is a 3-year pilot.
Okay, so it would last 3 years. My point was, how long would this thing last? So it could last until we enter the new building.
Well, that's part of it, and you'll see in the second component where there is also a difference of opinion between the two schools on what they want to do, how one of our thoughts is, let's give them a chance to try and see which one works best and then move into it.
Well, I understand the need for keeping things where everybody gets an equal chance to take classes they want. But on the other hand, the opportunity to try something different to see if it works or not. If it doesn't work, then you scrap it. It's a good chance to experiment it. If you want to call it with the guinea pigs, you only have one set of guinea pigs on each end of the county you're trying it with. And if it doesn't work, then you're out of nothing. You just don't do it anymore.
Now,
Yep.
when we had our meeting here, we only had Parkview teacher and the two teachers were here.
Just one teacher.
Teacher and principal.
Yeah.
No, not principal.
Yeah, it was
Dominique.
Dominique and Miss
All right.
Thomas. Yeah.
One teacher, the principal, and you could tell how excited the teacher was about the program.
Yeah.
Well, I went to Bluestone Wednesday night. They were talking about the dual enrollment in classes and changes and all that was being made. And the two teachers there were almost as excited about what they were going to teach as Kamisha was here at central office, even though they weren't here to show us. I saw it there.
And you know as well as I do, Ms. Garland, as a teacher, if you have a chance to have some buy-in into it, and it's like your baby. Whereas you're saying, Ms. Garland, you're going to teach this class whether you like it or not. How much enthusiasm are you going to show? You know,
Well, I saw it there with them, and I saw it with Kamisha Thomas here.
I see
And,
both sides of it. Could be
yeah.
a problem, but I see an opportunity to offer some new courses as an experiment. And if they don't work, you don't have to do them forever and ever.
The other thing that we have to think about too is if we have time to experiment with the curriculum, because the state is asking, you know, we're part of this cohort to get this done. And if we have time to work with the curriculum when we do get to our new school, then we have an opportunity for 2 blended classes instead of just the one that we've been honing and working on. I don't know. I understand the objections that have been brought up, and I do. And I think it's just a matter of weighing the pros and the cons
And I think if you could
for
still-
each of us.
I'm sorry, I think if you could still offer that class to the kid that did move, somehow you can figure out how to do it electronically, or somehow, you would eliminate that issue. I don't want to take it away from the kid because he had to move.
Right.
My concern again is simply what we went through last year. We had the whole community, well, not the whole community, a great deal of the people in the community up in arms because Parkview was one thing, Bluestone was the other. And I just don't want to see us get back in that same predicament again.
I would agree.
So I think at this point, Mr. Nichols, you will go back to these persons and bring it up and share with them the concerns that some of the board members have and see how we can address those and have further discussion during our next meeting on Monday night.
The second item that's a part of the innovation grant, that's a focus of the innovation grant, is working to give opportunity for the students to engage in activities that help build their understanding of such things as finance or interest in careers or any number of components that come up. And so both of the schools are looking at building their schedule so that there's an extra time for these classes that are engaged in those options for the students. This particular concept has been tried in schools all over the state and seems to be very successful. The difference is that Parkview is wanting to build theirs into the schedule twice a week, whereas Bluestone is asking to build theirs into the schedule each day. They've worked it out so that we can look at the time allotted for individual classes and still get that time built in to meet state requirements, but give them the flexibility. And in this case, they presented it to the committee and basically said, we're in a position to be able to do this if the board will allow us to have the extra time to build this class in, and then see which of the two works the best, and when we move into the new school, see if we want to continue it for once a day, each day, or 2 times a week. And again, I'll ask that there be an option for either of the members of the board who were on that committee to express their opinion of what they heard.
You want to go first? They call these blocks skinny blocks because they're very short. Bluestone's proposing a 25 minutes that they meet every day. And they can use that skinny block for maybe resume, a workshop on resume writing, a workshop on interviewing, a workshop on, what to wear to an interview, a workshop on, and they're also proposing that time could also be remediation time for students who might need catching up at certain times in the semester. They wouldn't do it all the time, but if there's something that they've been identified that maybe they need to be pulled out to work on, the math lesson or whatever, they would use that time for that as well. And again, I just kind of, I listened to the presentation. It's their idea. If they think it will help their student body, I really have a hard time saying, oh, no, it won't, because, they just came up with what they felt would work for them. Dora?
Yeah, I think you covered very much. I relate it back to the old study block we used to have, but this one is more structured than when we were doing the AB at Bluestone. We used a study block where students could go back to teachers that they needed help with, club meetings, things like this. And this skinny block is pretty much like that, but I think it's more to get the kids prepared to go out into the world. We don't have a subject that teaches them how to fill out resumes, how to do an interview, and how to dress. Some of these kids go to interviews dressed like they go to high school. I'm sorry, I don't have any of them get a job, but they need more structure in that part. And it's only 25 minutes, and I think you can cover it very much in that. And with the remediation too, that helps those kids that are behind and that miss school some.
So they'll be changing classes at that point, moving around.
It's at the same time every
Yeah.
day.
Let's say they'll be
Yeah.
moving
Same
around.
time.
And
Yeah.
they, that was not really explained as far as like how people are gonna know where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to show up there.
Right.
And I can't imagine that any principal would just let this fly. I have a feeling that they're gonna be figuring out where they're supposed to
Well,
go.
They
and-
actually had the first set for next year set up by grade level. And there will be grade level teachers that will be working with them and then making it as they would work almost like a homeroom area. They will work it and know remediation is a top priority. If you are tagged by math or science or whatever teacher for remediation, then that's the first priority. Beyond that, they are setting up numbers of components for what it might be for students to have, but they do have to sign up for them to be prepared to go, and of course, you sign up first come, first served basis, and you have another chance later if you don't make it the first time. It's not going to be a place where they can just go around or do nothing. Everybody's going to have to do something in those sessions and be assigned to them and be held for accountability. And again, I'm supportive of it because I hear, as I go out to business and industry all the time, the things that business and industry say, these students don't know how to do this, they don't know how to do that. Where in the world do we have something in the school that's built in for them to be able to learn these lessons? I mean, we're having to teach them everything now. And so this gives us a more flexible structure in which to build those. I think the real question is, do we need it every day or is twice a week, and that's why we're saying maybe it would be worthwhile to give one a chance to do one and one the other the first year, and then move it into, at least by the time we move into the new school, we're going, if it works well, and where it's been done, it's worked well, we will have had the chance to modify it so it's not something else to get used to in the middle of a new year.
What you're dealing with is either block scheduling or alternate day scheduling.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. Nothing new, just a different layer. We had it both ways. And if you do it, however you do it, and I have no objections to it, but however you do it has to be structured.
Right.
Wherein that you don't have 10 students going down the hall, 5 going the other way, and you ask them where they going, and they say, well, if we go into our study block, that needs to be put in writing as to how you're gonna do it. Have no objection to alternate day or block scheduling, but that's what that is.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Allgood.
If you take this time away from the other classes, are we gonna meet the state requirements for how long you gotta be in those classes?
That was the first thing that when they first came with that idea. I had no concerns about if we did it once or twice a week, because I know we can build that in. We currently have 100 minutes right now built into class. And that's to be able to build a bank time. That's not required. We could, as long as you're above 90, then you're okay. We can't go below 90. Okay, now that also puts us in a position that if we miss many days, we don't have
You don't
bank
have any
days to
bank
be able to
time.
go. We're gonna have to come off the calendar somewhere. And they understand that, but they have built it in so that they both know they're meeting the time for class requirements by the state guidelines.
Another thing to look at, and I know this would be very unpopular with the kids, but teachers are already there anyway. Could you add another 10, 15 minutes to the school day? We used to, and it got changed years ago.
Well,
The
that's-
kids were staying longer, and then it got bumped back, but the teachers didn't get to leave any earlier, because believe me, on that side, we were a little bit offended. If the kids leave, by God, why couldn't we leave? But
Well,
I'm just looking at it now,
right.
you know, if you added another 10 or 15 minutes,
I think what we'd want to
Make
do
up that
is,
time.
again, they've made the recommendation of the way they'd like to approach it. Let's give it a shot.
As long as it meets-
It's there to be modified.
as long as it meets the state
No,
state requirements. I don't
absolutely,
see
you got to
anything
meet the state
wrong.
requirements for that time in.
I have a
Yes,
question.
ma'am, Mrs. Smith.
Are the teachers who are involved in the program, are they meeting together no matter whether it's Bluestone or Parkview? So, and do they have the knowledge of we're trying to bring the county together in unity? Because I realize in the things that you all were speaking of, things like writing a resume, and there's so many things that many of the parents in our county want their kids to get back to the basics and to know a lot of these, because they're always talking about the gains in home economics, et cetera. So parents will be making these discussions and comparing. Do the teachers know that goal of bringing together as they work in unity?
We, of course, have been counting on the principals and the leadership teams. Each school has a leadership team.
Okay,
But the understanding of the leadership team is you build this in conjunction with all the teachers working together.
okay.
And so they have been they've been meeting as a leadership team, but also meeting with all of the teachers. And of course, they understand that we're moving together into.
I think her question was, are Parkview and Bluestone
Right.
working together?
Well, when
Yes.
we have had the professional development days, they have met as the leadership teams together. Yes,
Okay.
so they are, I can't tell you that all of the teachers of both schools are meeting together, but the leadership teams, which is a fairly comprehensive group.
Yes.
Because I've met with both of them, and I've met with them together, and I think they're getting that message out.
Well, that's good, because I know the public is in tune about this equity thing. And it could be a big problem if it's not done right. Whatever we're doing, it's going to have to be done right so that everybody can claim a part of what they're doing, actually buy into it.
Right.
Anybody else on that issue? Ms. Bailey?
One of the things that the principals talked about was the reason, in terms of the differences. Parkview wanted to do it on Tuesday and Thursday, and then Bluestone wanted to do it every day. One of the reasons that they felt like it would be Parkview has more students, so it would be easier to manage if they only did it twice a week, as opposed to doing it every day. It was just, the traffic. And I think that's why they kind of wanted to keep that to a minimum there. And they don't really have a lot of extra space there to do some of that. So that was one of that was some of the rationale between the two different scheduling options.
With those two meetings that Parkview would have, are they designating more time for each of those?
Yes. So at Bluestone, they were 25-minute skinny blocks, and at Parkview, they were 30-minute skinny blocks.
Okay.
So it gives them just a little bit of extra time.
Okay.
Anybody else?
And they were going to use those skinny blocks for some club days as well, because we've kind of gotten away from our club days, and our clubs are having a tough time getting some club time.
The third item that they've been focusing on is the development of our job shadowing, internship, and apprenticeship option. And that's taking a little bit more time because it's a topic that's pretty much foreign to most of our teachers looking into it. They've only been used to preparing students inside of the classrooms. But we are doing a lot of work in preparing for that meeting with the apprenticeship options and having conversations about how we as a school division can work on that. But the good news is that by having the committees work on this as well, then they're looking at that piece from the perspective of what do we need to do inside of the blended learning classes and the other to prepare students to shadow. You've heard me mention in our meetings that we want all of our graduates to have a job shadowing, internship, apprenticeship, some type of activity that they would have to graduate with. And businesses have responded very positively. There have been articles already in the paper about Bluestone having engagement with the Chamber of Commerce in Clarksville and Shea City. South Hill has had the same engagement. I'm going to be presenting at the Chamber of Commerce meeting in March on some of these very plans that are coming up. So this is a piece that's very important, and the businesses say we want to do this, but we need to make sure when students come to us that they are going to be responsible. And so how do we identify the components of responsibility and that students have met those? And we've chosen to use digital badges that would identify which students have actually taken classes in how to dress for success. What is your discipline? What is your attendance procedure? What are those types of things that are worked out? And by building those items into the extra time period, then we can say which students have participated and how they did. How did they respond? Are they putting something together to say that I'm prepared to take those opportunities? So we may not have as much information, but it's setting a foundation that we will continue to work on for those opportunities in the future and building that piece. And I think that may be one of the more important components of this whole innovation grant that we're working on. Now, the other thing that the high schools presented was an opportunity to have a discussion about the Need My Transcript software. And I know we voted to move on that, so there may be more questions that would be asked of Mrs. Hendrick, but again, before we get started, both of our board members on the instructional committee were a part of that, and I might ask if they had any questions that were answered that they might want to share, and then if there are other questions, we can find out from Ms. Hendrick before we move in that area.
Ms. Gardner, Ms. Bailey?
Well, I know that Ms. Hendrick answered the questions I had. It's not going to cost us anything. The students will be trained, not trained, but told how they can go online to get their transcripts sent wherever. The advantages I could see, if I went into the guidance office right now and say, I'd like my transcript sent to so-and-so, I wouldn't have the $2 to pay for it. I'd have to say, I have to come back. This way, even if they go to the guidance office, the guidance people can tell them, look, use this and you can put your debit card, credit card in, and we'll send it right off. The transcripts are not going to be online. It's just to notify them to send it to a certain school, and then the guidance counselors will send a notice that they have been sent. I'm wondering how the time is being saved, but I think instead of doing all the money transactions, it will save time. Plus, we get money back. It's not going to cost us anything, but we will get money back from the times that the students use it. And Ms. Hendrick, the students that have already graduated, if they call you, you can tell them what they can do, right? Or will they have information on the website itself? I'm not.
Yeah, when a graduate would call, we would direct them to the website, and it would have a link right on our Mecklenburg County website page, and they would click on the link. And once they click on it, it will ask for their information to verify who they are, so that way we know that we are seeing the transcripts for that person that verifies their identity. And if they request how they want them to be sent, or they want them to be sent to, and accepts their credit card payment, then the school counselor will get an email saying that Mrs. Garner has requested her transcripts to be mailed to her home, and the school counselor will then take care of the transcripts, print them, mail them to their home, log into the system, and say, I have completed this request, and Ms. Garner will then get an email back saying your transcript request has been completed. And it would have a log, so that way too, they could go on, the counselors could go on and see transcript requests that need to still be done, and ones that have been finished and completed so far.
I think it would be helpful for our county if we went with it.
Ms. Bailey?
So we did find out that the Need My Transcript software, it's a North Carolina-based company. And so most of the clients that they have right now are in North Carolina because it's a North Carolina-based company. There are about 38 in South Carolina, 38 school divisions that are participating. And Virginia is kind of frontier territory for the company. And I think because we are on the border, you know, as they move their way north, that was part of the reason why she only could come up with 5 divisions in Virginia. But they are doing a lot of business. But the thing that I really, the reason I would like to see us be able to move forward with this is because both of our guidance departments were very excited about having this tool at their disposal, because I know what it's like to get distracted from what I'm doing. You know, if I have to answer the phone and do that kind of thing, and then I lose track of where I was, and then I go back there. And that's, I think, where the time savings is. And just so that everybody understands, if you're a current student, there is no charge to have your transcript sent somewhere. That is free. There's only a charge if you've already graduated or you've been gone for years and an employer is requesting that. And the other thing that I really think is important is that our guidance departments aren't really set up for a retail situation. And nobody carries cash anymore. And it's really hard. And personal checks are not always very reliable. Sometimes they are made out of rubber. So if the company allows for all of these transactions to be done with a credit card, and so it makes it a lot easier for that money to be collected. And so, but if none of this was a good idea and our guidance department wants it, I'm in favor of it. So that's
Also, the company will train our guidance counselors.
Anybody else? Yes, sir, Mr. Ritchie.
So when there's no charge, how do they make their dollar? They do this for free?
Yes,
Okay.
because they will get enough of a charge, especially off the third parties. They say third parties where they get most of their money. It's a $5.95 cheap fee for the third parties. So employment verification.
Okay.
So when the companies that verify that make $40 to $50 themselves for simple calling us to say, hey, I need my transcript. So they get $5.95 for that. So they were willing to set up current students, no charge, based off of that fee that they get off those third parties, and also making the recommendation for us to up our fee from the $3 to $15 for those third parties, even up to $20 if we wanted to go that high, because they're getting that money, and then we're only getting the $3 from it. So they're like, why not get that extra from those third party verifications?
And Ms. Hendrick, I just wanted to say thank you for your prep work that you did on this. And also, I had an opportunity to go by both schools, had to sign some signature card or something. We got diplomas or something they got to print up here soon. But, you know, I was excited, and I concur with Mrs. Bailey and with Mrs. Garner, that both of the counselors, you know, said it would save them some steps and save them time, and they were on board. So, again, just thank you for this information, and thank you for what you're doing for our school system. Thank you.
Mr. Daniels. Yes, we also heard from the middle schools. And I think the largest issue for the middle schools, of course, is the career exploration component that we need so badly. This year, we put into place the 2 teachers that are teaching the state requirements for career information. We've had that now at both of the middle schools. Those teachers have been trained and have been working on that process. But again, there's a significant grant that we have gotten as one of the schools in the Region 3 of Go Virginia that is poised to be putting in a significant amount of equipment for career exploration in our middle schools. There's simulated welders that would give the students an opportunity to learn how to weld without having the actual heat. They have the goggles and everything that really simulates what they're doing. There are the medical, I'm going to say medical dummies. I don't know what other word to use, but they're the dummies that can, you know, birth babies and respond to the things and whatnot. That
Have a
will be
pulse
coming
and a
in.
blood
Have
pressure.
pulse and blood pressure. And they get a chance to work with that to see if there's interest there. There's robotics that comes into the program. There's the 3D printers. There's a number of things, and there's a significant input from the Go Virginia Region 3 into giving the chance to all of the schools in our region, which is basically from Brunswick County to Henry County and then up to Amelia, Buckingham, Cumberland, and so forth. There have been some pilots. The pilot programs are all different. They're going very well. There is a significant in-kind contribution that we have to commit to, and knowing that we were going to be moving to one school at the time, I thought it was going to be in 21, 22. We know now it's going to be 22, 23, but it still means that I did not commit us to purchasing 2 schools worth of this equipment, and it's because it is very expensive. So we're in a position now that equipment needs to come into our schools next year and be used. And we're working on a plan as to how we're going to put it in and make it a part of that career technology materials until we can get into the new schools and have it all blended in together. But it's not going to be the same equipment. I can't put all of the same equipment in both places. So again, we'll have probably over the next 2 years, some of it in one school, the other at the other, and then vice versa. Although there's also the issue that right now at Parkview Middle School, they simply don't have anywhere to put it. And so we have a dilemma in place we don't want the equipment to just sit still for another year. We have the training opportunities and everything going on, so I'm just going to have to say we're still working on a plan. I'll have to bring that plan to you, but I did want to make you aware of the situation, that we don't know exactly how we're going to work this situation out with the space, the numbers of students that have to go through, the amount of time it's going to take to go through it on top of what the state's required. It's an excellent opportunity. It's going to help our students get a much better taste of what careers they might be interested in, but getting them there until we merge is going to be quite an interesting process.
Mr. Nichols, could it be that, and I'm sorry I'm not using this microphone, but it's feeding back. Could it be that with that equipment, could we use, so everybody's using it all year, both schools, could we do one semester at one school and move it back and forth like that?
That's a possibility to consider, although we're working with students going through the process on a semester basis. I think that's right. So we'll have to see. Again,
Okay.
that's a part
All
of it.
right, that was just a question.
Yeah, but again, the big issue there is just that it comes back to where we're going to do it.
Space, right,
Space.
I understand.
We simply don't, there are a couple of trailers at Parkview Middle School right now that I think we're going to have to condemn because they're just in that bad a shape, and that's going to make even less space. That's going to mean that some of the teachers are going to have to use the same classroom for moving forward next year.
Yeah, those trailers need to go.
Yeah.
And we can't afford to put new ones in there at this point in time when we're going to be building new schools. So that's a significant issue for Parkview for next year.
So again, that's some information, but that's some great news. So hopefully, maybe will be a happy medium somewhere, and we can come up with something.
Now, again, I'd ask the members of the committee to voice their opinion, having heard the presentation.
Ms. Bailey or Ms. Garner?
Ms. Garner?
The only thing they suggested was house the equipment at Bluestone because they did have a space. And when they were going over something at Parkview, if it was feasible to transport that piece of equipment to Parkview at the time to use, but then bring it back to
Right.
Bluestone. But like Mr. Nichols said, it's going to take some planning and working out.
Ms. Bailey?
And I will say,
I'm sorry.
Dr. Lax was excited about the opportunity because she doesn't have the numbers of electives at Bluestone that are available at Parkview Middle. So she felt like that was one of the ways that, we could kind of even those opportunities out. So I just wanted, because that was something that
We're looking at it in
Dr.
the light
Lax.
of those electives that she's not.
Yes,
Mr. Palmer?
May not work, but we also could see if we could get something donated from some of our larger companies, knowing that we are fighting and we need to let them know this when we go to talk, that we're fighting for the new school and we're hoping that things will turn the way we want. I would not be a bit surprised if there aren't some companies out there that would be willing to, maybe not one of the newer buildings, but I know some companies, and so do you, that may be
Storage.
interested in giving us something
To work with.
until we get to the point of having what we need.
That had not been brought up or considered. I hadn't thought about that, but we'll pursue it. If you have some names that I can get in touch with, let me know.
Be happy to.
Yes, sir, Mr. Edwards?
Maybe you can get Brian to check on just leasing one building for 2 years to put in place at Parkview Middle School, just as a lease, because if you're gonna take 2 out, your electrical, plumbing, and everything is already there. So if you took one out and you put a lease unit on the building for 24 months, like an office space building, then they could use it, and then if the lease is up 2 years, you move it out,
Yes.
and you don't buy it, so you don't have all that money. It's just something you might look into.
Sure.
Okay.
So,
great
Mr.
idea.
Mr. Nichols, you'll look into that. That's a great idea. All right.
So that's from the academic perspective. We also have had a athletic committee meeting where we asked the athletic directors to come to the table to start talking about the opportunities of putting the schools together and what options there might be there. One of the primary components of that discussion was the idea that I've heard floated about that we should perhaps not have Bluestone and Parkview compete with each other.
Mr. Nichols,
over the next 2
real
years.
quick, just so I know we're not jumping over anything, the honor class development and the arts program development at the middle school.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we did, you didn't touch on either one of those.
No, I did not, excuse me.
Okay, I just want to make sure we didn't miss
We
anything.
did have a discussion about the fact that there is a desire to make sure that students are engaging in more arts. We had a discussion about the band and what options there might be for the bands as they've gotten so small. And would we be in a position to maybe see the bands coalesce in competitions and things for next year, and how we could work that part out?
I don't say that would, I don't say that would work from the standpoint of being a band director, unless they did the same band camp, did the same show.
Well, that was part of the conversation, is could they actually work together and have the same band camp? And then, but there was a question, is there a competition group that controls those types of things that might say you can't put two schools together?
I don't think so. We're not governed like junior high school league with sports. I think that could be done under the guidelines that we're going to become one school, or we could just become one school, Mecklenburg County. I don't think that would be the issue. I think the issue would be two directors trying to pick who's going to do what show, what music. It's almost like putting two football teams together and then say, all right, now go in on Friday night and each of y'all play your game with the same players you practice together. It's a tough thing to do. I know the numbers are really, really dangerously low, especially in my end of the county. It's very disturbing, but I don't think you're going to be able to put them together until they actually come under the same roof. I think it'd be awfully difficult. Parades, yes. We could do the Raleigh Parade or the local parades. You just decide to go off, play the same piece of music. But with the halftime show, it's a little more involved.
What about competitions on weekends? Would that,
If you figure a place where they're going to practice together, because you can't just practice the brass on one end of the counter, the woodwinds on the other, and decide to put it together. There's some rhyme and reason to this crazy stuff we do as musicians. It really is. It may not look like it, but you know, it's a fine line there. I don't see it working, and I'm trying to be optimistic about it.
Well, you would be our board member with the most expertise.
I put it to you this way: if I was out there and you said, "Ricky, can you make this happen?" I said, "No, sir."
The only good part about that, Rick, if I may speak, is that individually, you can compete at the level at which you have the group. If you only have 100 students, then you compete at that smaller level.
Yeah.
And so the two groups that we have now would not be going up against some of the schools and larger groups. So that would help a little bit.
Well, and there was also conversation at this meeting about when we move to the new school, how could we expand on the arts programs or the music programs, adding choir.
Of course, yes.
Theater. We currently do not have teachers that are licensed for either one of those. We have to go looking to see for that. But, you know, there will be some changes, and so that's just, we know that's something that we would like to do. We'll have to continue to look and see what arrangements. But how do you build that into a schedule?
Now, your music teachers are music K through 12. We're endorsed to teach any type of music.
So that was the question.
Qualified or not.
Conversation.
But we're
But not,
endorsed, we're
but not
endorsed to do
theater.
it.
You have to be theater. Theater's different.
Is that even have a endorsement?
It does.
Does it? I don't
Yeah.
know. I know a lot of times that's under the English.
But a music teacher can teach a choral class. That's not an issue. Choral, vocal. So you don't call it vocal, you call it chorus.
Well, your
Right.
degree in music is K through 12 music. It doesn't matter what you teach. Choir, strings, fiddle, they don't matter. It's music. And you teach it all.
But he's saying voice is different.
No, it's not. Your endorsement is K through 12 music, and it covers everything under music.
Okay.
I've got one sitting on the wall.
And again, if I might add, you know, of course, this is a passion of mine. I'm not the greatest singer, but I do enjoy singing. But, you know, we're going to have a 1,200-seat auditorium there with nice chairs and a nice stage, and it would be great if we started it, because we have 3 years to get into the new building. If we started at the 6th grade this year, we could build 6th, 7th, 8th, and then when we go into the new school, we've got something to showcase on that stage. So that's why I was, you know, a proponent to try to go ahead and add it for this year, so we can start it this year. So that's all I have to say about
And that would be
that.
a full-time equivalent.
Yes,
You'd
ma'am.
be teaching 3 blocks
Yes, ma'am.
if you did.
Mr. Palmer?
So if I'm hearing you what we'll be doing is recruiting someone for the upcoming year.
Yes, sir.
That can do what we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
Teachers.
And until that happens, we maybe could piggyback on the community college and see if one of the ladies down there, one of the groups that you sing with, would maybe work with some of our students after school, because that's where some of these extra programs are gonna have
Core
to
club.
start from, and that is
Core club.
after school. And I think parents, if they really want their kids to excel in the arts, they would not mind picking them up in the afternoons after school.
And again, it is crucial because we're right at the point now where we are starting to schedule for next year. And, you know, if we're going to do it, we need to, you know, we need to go ahead and get it in place so we can offer these at the middle school next year. Yes, sir, Mr. Edwards.
Money.
Money, yes, sir, I understand that.
Okay, that's, I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yes, sir.
You mean,
I would
Well,
definitely,
you mean
gonna
for
get
the teacher?
For the teacher.
$400,000, I just wanted.
For the
I mean,
teacher, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I know we need it, no question, but, you know,
Well, it would be another elective.
I don't know who worked with the Clarksville students, but I know that Dr. Hips worked with ones from J City that did a course. I think after Thanksgiving, she worked with the kids, and they performed in Clarksville. The
Both schools
elementary
performed.
and J
Yes.
City both came over for the tree lighting. So we have somebody that can do it. Don't you take Dr. Hips from J
she's
City.
remarkable.
Dr. Hips teaches keyboarding. She teaches violin. She does the chorus, and she works with all of these kids after school with no compensation.
She does the band too.
Uh,
She does the band after school too.
oh, I didn't know she had a little band.
Yeah, Chase City does.
And see, I don't know. I know the music teacher from Clarksville left, and Baskerville, right, is working with the kids there.
Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I do believe that some of those people in the community would help us in getting the program started.
I think it's, because again, you know, especially the last 3 years, and those, you know, you all hear the same thing that I hear when we go away to these meetings, is that the arts are becoming ever more needed and more prevalent in our school systems today. And the school systems that are thriving and flourishing are building their music programs within the school, whether it be band, playing the piano, chorus, whatever. It's these systems are succeeding. And it gives the kids another opportunity to explore with other children, and it just gives them an outlet, because again, I go back to saying I'm a dead horse, but you know, I know if I didn't have that in school, I don't feel like I would be the person I am today. So,
And
Well-
the theater group that they have at Parkview, I've been to every play, I think, since I've been on the board. When they were doing it at La Crosse, the Commerce Center down there. And then they've moved up to the South Hill location now. And these kids do a wonderful
Remarkable.
job. I mean, the teachers really work with those kids, and they are excited about doing it.
And that is a club.
I didn't know.
And
whether
that
it
is
was
a club. It's not a class that they teach during the day. And it piggybacks with the forensics. They do a lot of the same types of activities with forensics. So a lot of the kids that do forensics will do theater as well. And so it's all after school, and
And they have a children's,
yeah, the children one is getting ready to do another program about Rapunzel
yes,
coming up.
Ms. Howell is doing
Ms.
that.
Howell's been working on it.
All right.
I would like to clarify something, and I'll respect Mr. Allgood. Sometimes they make changes. When you got your licensure, you might have been grandfathered in, but
Oh,
I
this is
think
different,
I'm correct that the voice, choir is a part of voice and does require a separate licensure. Ms. Alga, is that not true?
It is? When did that go into effect?
You have an instrumental side of licensure and you have a full side, so you need a license for
I stand corrected.
Well, and yours,
Mine is for both.
would not necessarily be able to teach the full side.
yours is grandfathered in.
Yeah. I didn't know
And
that.
I
was-
think,
motion, you teach both.
no, he's busting up about that.
I think
When he told him he had to
I
listen
think
to
we
it.
also know now that the theater is a licensure of its own, separate from English, so,
They really simplify things for us, don't they?
oh yeah, just wait.
All right.
Matt, I have a, Ms. Alger, she said that the drama was club after school. That teacher would not have to have the
Not for a
license,
club.
would she?
Not
the
for a
club?
club.
Not
No,
as a club, it wouldn't.
No.
Keep it a club.
yeah, but,
Keep it as a club,
yeah, but,
because she does a good job.
And,
yeah.
and knowing as well that at the middle school and the high school, we're not just running out of space on the east end, but on both ends, you run out of time, because there's so many things that have to be done. I think if we're gonna build programs, we're gonna need to be creative in finding extra time after school, maybe giving some adjustments and, to teachers and say, if you come in, maybe you could come in at 10 and then work beyond for your schedule to be able to get some of these things in. If you're gonna want this, give me some flexibility on being able to work with them in that way, because that I think is gonna be the requirement for the kids to be able to participate.
All right. All right, moving on. So we're at, I'm sorry, Mr. Nichols, I just didn't want to make sure we
What
left.
about
So
B3?
report, I'm sorry,
B3.
honors class development.
Yes, we did also have the discussion related to the fact that as we're working at the middle school, the need for students to be prepared when they leave us to go on, if they're particularly on a career pathway that requires a bachelor's degree or higher, they need to have stronger classes that are beyond what's been taught for the SOLs, starting in middle school. And so we had a discussion about having teachers at the high school that are teaching the N classes, the dual enrollment or the AP classes, the calculus, the statistics, and I've talked with some of the teachers about this, actually working with our core subject areas, moving back into saying what needs to be in place in middle school so that you can come in prepared for the high school, so that you can be successful for governor's school or for whatever it might be. And so we're having that discussion. We're talking about what kind of accountability assessments are going to need to be in place so that we can identify the students in middle school that are ready, because you can't give up on Math 7 and 8. The Math 7 and 8 are actually probably the most important fundamental classes for any of the career programs, because it teaches the higher order thinking skills that we're talking about, not being able to lead. But if they've mastered that, as they should have, if they're moving on to college prep, then they need the algebra and geometry, but they need it at a level that's going to prepare them for Algebra 2 and for trigonometry and for those classes. I'm sure Mr. Ritchie is quite familiar with, as a math teacher, that situation of being prepared when you get to college rather than having it be overwhelming. And we're seeing that now with our students going to governor's school. They are not as prepared for the math in particular as they need to be. And I don't know if you have any comments on that, but that's a piece of what we were talking about as well. And I think it also, as you're on the gifted committee, we haven't had a gifted committee meeting yet. We haven't had a chance, but that's been something the gifted committee has been, I think, looking for as well. So, any comments?
Anybody have any board members have any questions?
We did talk about also our 9th and 10th graders now, starting to prepare them for AP curriculum. Once we get to our, because I believe it was the board's pleasure that once we get to the combined school, that we might consider offering AP again. And so those classes, those students now need to be exposed to that pre-AP curriculum so that they are ready when they get there. We're not there yet.
But when they go to the new school, it won't be AP/DE. Because we got enough kids that are smart enough to do AP by itself. And if we start now in the 8th and 9th grade, they should be able to do AP. But if they're given the choice AP/DE, they're going to do the DE test and all. So keep them separate, but offer that AP class to them.
And again, that was something, like Mrs. Bailey said, that we were going to revisit once we got into the new school system.
But preparing for them to be able to be
Yes.
successful with it now.
Yes.
All right, then in the athletics, we were also having a conversation about what do we need to do as far as combining the schools. There has been some conversation about them not competing with one another over the next 2 years, but in fact, as the athletic directors pointed out to the committee, the schedules for next year are pretty much already in place. And it's going to be very difficult to disrupt that without putting our students and our programs in jeopardy for tournament time and things of that nature. So that's an issue for next year, but there's also the issue which they came to us with, specifically related to the idea of those are the games that are the most attended and therefore the biggest gate. And so,
Can I just say something about that?
absolutely.
Mr. Ritchie?
I go to a lot of those games, and I've never seen a problem. I mean, I think this rivalry thing is overblown as far as it being trouble between the two schools. We have issues when we play Brunswick or when we play Greensville, but the Parkview Bluestone game is just, I mean, everybody enjoys that. I've never seen any fights or, you know, them having to stop the game and scold the crowd or anything like that. I don't think that it's the issue that some people try to make it out to be.
General consensus of the athletic directors was it's more an issue for the parents than it is for the staff.
Yeah,
Amen.
the older people are the ones who talk about
Tell y'all
it.
that.
The kids don't, I've never seen it from the kids. I've never seen any misbehavior at those games from the kids, so.
So that was just something that we wanted to bring back to this board, if there was going to be discussion about it anymore and what we would want to do moving forward. And again, those of you that were on the committee, I think it was Mr. Palmer and Ms. Bailey.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak on that?
Mr. Palmer, the floor is yours.
I do not see any problem with playing regular games against each other. I would like to see maybe we not name it as King of the County. I think that may bring a little bit of animosity.
Yes.
But otherwise, I do not see any problem. I was in this thing for too many years, and I know that the two schools played against each other, and there was good old-fashioned competition. Ben Taylor and I, when we got on that field, I wanted my team to win, and he wanted his to win. But when the game was over, we walked together out the gate, and we said, we'll see you next week, or we'll see you whenever. That has no problem, I don't think, of us playing together. I think of playing against each other. It's just the fact of the terminology. Let's not say king of the county.
Right.
But other than that, let's go for it.
I think for the new school, excuse me, Ms. Bell.
That's all right, go ahead.
What the athletic committee could be working on is what are going to be the rules for the school that you're going to. Don't have the rules coming in here, from here and here. Just make sure that the same set start maybe next year, that the rules are the same. If you play for this team and you quit, then you don't play for this team, or vice versa. I don't know what that.
We did talk about
Yeah.
a player handbook and expectations
Yeah.
for players, and we talked about a lot of those things, and those things are in the planning. The athletic directors are gonna work together. They actually asked for the next planned PD time to give them some time to work together on that, so they don't have to listen to some of this other stuff that all the rest of the teachers have to do at PD time. So those things, there is a plan moving forward to get all that together.
And then another thing, I know it came up because he's hit me twice with it. Who gets into the games? When I first started going to the games, when I first started teaching, it was the teacher plus one. And I know it was changed a few years back, I don't know whether you remember, but they felt like the teacher plus family members would bring more people to the ball games. And Justin has basically said it has gotten out of hand. You got the teacher coming in with 5 or 6, 7 brothers, sisters, and cousins. And so he would like to see us go back to having a ticket that says the teacher plus one.
And the teacher has to be present.
Yes, yes.
So,
I think Ms. Bailey can say that was addressed, and I don't know whether I'm putting myself out to dry or not, but I was one who thought maybe it would be wise to say, as you have said, the individual and one. You can take anything to the extreme, and when they start, as several of the ADs said when we were in that meeting, I think, I'll just say, you can take anything to the extreme. If you got 4 or 5 people coming in, that's not your family, your immediate family.
well, Yes.
But you
Now
know,
it's family.
what might happen then is the other people just won't come. I think the ADs are thinking all these people will start paying, but I don't think that's what's gonna happen. You're not gonna pay, somebody's not gonna bring 4 or 5 people in and pay for all of them. They just won't come. So I don't think it's gonna increase the gate much, if anything.
Well, I mean, again, those individuals that are coming as family members aren't paying anyways. I mean, they might buy some food or a drink or something.
You're not losing anything.
Right.
And
But
I
I-
think if you look at the cards that we have from our association, if you look at the back of it, that's what we should be going by.
That's only a mid-size.
Well, our policy right now states that it is the teacher and family. Employee and family. So that'll be something that we can maybe discuss,
That would need to come up in
right,
the policy.
as a policy, right, and we'll be able to discuss that at a further date, and that'll give us something to think about moving forward, because we do want to make it fair for everybody.
Right.
Anybody have any other questions about anything with athletics?
Do you want to address the sports that we thought we might include?
Yes, ma'am. We talked about when we move into the new school, what other opportunities, because we've always said when we have a larger school that we would like to be able to expand our programs. And so we had that discussion with the athletic directors. It was their opinion that the new school will be a 3A school and not go up into a 4A. They stated in their discussions with the high school league that whereas there are now 6, they're thinking they're going to go back to 4 because 6 have been too many. And so we would be a large 3A as opposed to Parkview being a small 3A and Bluestone being a 2A. And so they still don't know whether with that we would tend to move into other competition with other large 3A schools to the west or to the north. We probably won't know, but they do need to take that information back to the high school league now in order to be preparing for that into the future. So we wanted them to go ahead and begin collecting that information for us. And then as far as new sports, there was a request that we might look at having a boys volleyball. And they felt like we would have no trouble putting a boys volleyball team together, that there have already been boys that have been asking for that opportunity. And then a girls field hockey team. And the fields that we have will be prepared for field hockey, so we could do that. We also mentioned the fastest growing sport in Virginia is the
Lacrosse.
electronic sports. And so we would be looking at possibly being able to work with the electronic sports. We talked about lacrosse. That was one of the athletic director's primary candidate, but there's nobody close to us playing lacrosse. And so, and it's also
What would be the closest school division, I guess?
way over in Tidewater.
Oh.
Or Chesterfield.
Okay, so Chesterfield doesn't, Chesterfield doesn't have a lacrosse team? Okay.
And it's very expensive.
I know it's expensive. I've done, yeah.
Outfit.
Yeah. We had some pretty significant conversation about football. Football is losing out all over the state. There are very few middle school teams that have football, or middle schools that have football anymore. In fact, our own region is reduced to just 5 that have football teams. Some of the high schools are also suffering around the state because of liability issues that are coming up. Although, when you look at the statistics, lacrosse and soccer often have more concussions than football does because of the equipment. But it's the rap that's been getting. So we don't know what ultimately is going to happen with football. We had a discussion about the fact that, you know, when they're ordering equipment, not jerseys now, but when they're ordering equipment that will be able to move into the new school. So that's something that we don't want to waste money on buying something that's going to be unique to Parkview and Bluestone now. But we'll be moving into the new school with having the things ready to just be repainted.
And they're losing JV teams at the high school.
And the JV teams are at a loss as well. Both of the athletic directors felt like we can move forward and be comfortable that we will have one, in the immediate future, but it's just a question of how long, we don't know.
Are there boys volleyball teams around that we would
Yes,
be able to play?
there are local volleyball teams with the boys' teams. There are more of those than there are field hockey. So that was the discussion on the athletics. I don't think I left out anything. Do either of you remember anything else?
I think that was it.
But we can have more discussion as. the
There
board-
was a question about the athletic trainer's contract, but I don't know if you have had a chance to.
No, we'll go
explore
with
that.
We can do that later. All right, that would take us on to fiscal year 2021 budget then. I don't know if you feel we've been at it for a little over an hour. Do you need a little bit of a break before we move into that area?
Week,
Sorry?
about a week.
I think if everybody's okay, we'll go ahead and move, just to save a little time, we'll move right into budget. And then before we go into close, maybe we'll take a quick break, if that's okay, if that's the will of the board.
Okay.
Just so this doesn't last as long as the last one.
Right, well, it won't, because
Oh, okay.
basically, we've given you the information at the January meeting of what had been requested of the board. What we've done since the January meeting is actually to take that data and pulled out of it all of the information that would go into our CIP plan. You've got a copy of the CIP plan on the budget as well. That's the long-term maintenance plan. I will tell you that has reduced the cost of what the schools are asking for, but having been in the finance meeting at the Board of Supervisors again this morning, I will tell you that my recommendation for the board for budget for next year, being that there are still many things about the state budget that we don't know at this point. My recommendation is that we will be in a position to carry forth to the Board of Supervisors the step increase for our teachers, which Mr. Carter confirmed with the board this morning is going to be in the budget for next year, that they still have that for us. And then that we would be looking at putting in the 4 behavioral specialists, because we absolutely need the 4 behavioral specialists and some alternative ed for next year, for elementary school.
Yes,
For elementary. And I think we may be looking at some funding from the state for that piece of it, but nothing's guaranteed, whether it's in there or not, we need it, and that's going to be my recommendation. Now, there are some other specialists in here that are being, requested by the schools, and if you see something in here that you're particularly interested in, we can look at it. But I'm telling you, I don't think we're going to get anything more than what those 2 items as we move forward for next year, and that we're looking at trying to implement these things in what we have locally.
Mr. Nichols, what are we looking at as an increase in the 4 behavioral specialists and the step increase?
Well, again, we don't know.
Could Ms. Pfeffer address that?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Pfeffer, yes, if you don't mind coming. So, I'm looking at the total budget, but I was just wondering if you had a number, what the step increase and just the 4 behavioral specialists, what we're going to be looking at asking for.
The step increase is going to cost about $1.2 million.
I'm sorry.
1.2 million.
Okay. And then what about the behavioral
It
specialists?
depends what scale we put them on. If we put them on the teacher scale, they're going to range around $70,000 apiece.
Okay.
If they're put on another scale, then it's going to be a little higher than that, maybe 90, 95.
Depending on their experience, is that correct?
It will depend on their experience, but when I average $70,000, it's middle of the scale.
It's the middle?
Middle of the
Okay.
scale.
Okay. Any other board members have any questions for Ms. Pfeffer? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Bailey, the floor.
If the General Assembly approves a salary increase, will the step cover that?
No.
So that'll be so is it possible
If
that?
there's a salary increase, then that increases the step.
It depends how big of an increase they plan on making. A 3% increase, the step will cover it for SOQs.
Okay, so the step will cover it?
Yeah.
Okay,
The
that's what-
step equals about, if you average it out, 2.5%.
But that's sort of playing with the teachers. I mean, if you're giving the step and saying that that's covering the 3% increase, then you're not getting a 3%.
3% increase, that was going to be my question.
To each person?
Yes, ma'am.
No, you're not. Because not everybody's going to get a 3% increase.
This is,
It's about 1.5% until you get to step 5 or 6. Then it's about 3%.
Well, won't we be mandated to give the, if,
No, it's not mandated. If the state always is in a position that they're saying, we're going to provide the funding for this increase, but it's only the funding for SOQ covered issues.
okay.
And the state then, the locality has to come back and say whether they will take that or not.
So
Yeah, it never covers all the people.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Nichols, what would be your recommendation? Are we, or Ms. Pfeffer, are we going to give 3% across the board, or would it just be according to the SOQs?
That would be a Mr. Nichols decision.
No, well, first of all, what I have seen of the budget, the governor's budget, is not looking at a 3% for next year. It's looking at it for the
For
second.
22.
Second
Okay,
biennium.
okay.
Second.
So we're not,
year.
that will be a discussion for another year. Now, they could come back and say, we want to change it because the General Assembly can change the governor's budget. They're the ones that are going to vote on it. If they chose to do it this year, then I would take to the Board of Supervisors and say, we want to go along with what the state's asking for because you are getting funding for that. If you don't use it, you lose it. Okay?
Cheapest raise you're gonna
It's the
get.
cheapest raise you're going to get. But I would also say, if you give the 3%, but we don't give the step, or we build it into the step, then we're going right back to the same thing, where the step doesn't mean anything.
Right.
You either gotta do both or nothing.
Yeah.
The same problem you had.
Right.
Yeah.
We start over again.
Can't do it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Palmer, the floor is yours.
Question, and I should know this, what is starting salary for Mecklenburg County now?
40,000.
And do you have any idea of surrounding counties?
Yeah, we're right there with our surrounding counties. They're all at about 40,000, and you got to throw out Greensville because they're way high. But with all the regions around us, Charlotte, Halifax is actually less than us. Lunenburg, Brunswick.
Brunswick's at 42.
We all run about the same.
Okay.
Buckingham, I think, right now, outside of Greensville, is the largest one in our region, but they're competing against Charlottesville.
Yeah, Buckingham and Greensville are really outliers when it comes
Amelia's
to.
competing against Chesterfield, but
Well, Amelia is still,
lower than,
and Henderson, Vance County, are they still trying to get,
Oh, I would have no idea.
because I know they had problems a couple of years ago.
I haven't looked at North
Those two
Carolina
schools together.
scales in a while.
Yeah, they're struggling.
Well, their scales are set by the state anyway, right?
Yeah, but each county can add to them.
A little bit too.
Yeah.
Mr. Nichols, my next question would be, or comment would be, and hopefully you can guide us, or Ms. Pfeffer, either one. We have an opportunity to get this 1%
yes,
increase in funding for school construction.
that's correct.
Since, and I think that would generate, what, between $3 and $5 million?
It's anticipated that.
Annually.
If the economy is as robust in the future as we currently have it, and we continue to have tourism as we have had it in the last years, it could generate as much as $5 million, or equivalent to about an 8 cents increase in real estate tax.
Okay. I guess with that being said, we are changing, this is my comment, that we are changing and we're moving in a positive direction, combining our schools and trying to, give the best education we possibly can. Anybody that knows that comes along with increases, cost. And I just, I don't want this board to be held hostage, because we're building a new school, that some of these things that we're asking for or that we need in our school system, so that's going to happen. And, I guess my comment would be hopefully maybe that some of that funding that the Board of Supervisors maybe aren't going to be putting out as far as that construction is concerned to help pay that back, that we could use some of those monies towards
Keep in mind.
things
as
like
you
this.
alluded to, that money can only go for construction.
Right, it can only go for school construction, yes, sir.
And it also has to be voted on locally. Yes, sir. We've got to, if it passes the legislature, we still have to go on the ballot, and we're going to need to sell it to our community.
I'm already working.
That's something that we're going to need to work on. And again, I was at the Board of Supervisors meeting this morning in the Finance Committee, and they are just as emphatic about the need for that 1% sales tax as we are, so they're going to work with us on that. But they, of course, being the Board of Supervisors, are more prone to the numbers for taxes and everything else that's going on. They're having those conversations. I can only come back and say what I'm hearing right now as far as their instructions to us as what's going on. I will say that they are looking beyond the building of the secondary school and emphatic that we've got to either rebuild or build new the elementary schools. And that's going to require some significant study and work on our part to be able to make recommendations about which direction and how we want to move forward. And we need to start that planning now. Because if we move in 22, 23, then I would say it takes a year, and I've had this conversation with Mr. Jeffers and Mr. Dalton, it's going to take a year to work out some of the kinks in the new school. But we need to be in a position to move elementary students into the existing high schools on either end to get that process going, because we cannot keep the existing high schools going too much longer, even with more maintenance. And we brought that up with the board members this morning. You know, they just approved $50,000 today to do some more work on the roof at South Hill Elementary School. You know, we're going to have to keep these schools maintained moving forward, and that's why I put in the agenda on your board docs a copy of the long-term CIP plan, and you'll see in years 2 and 3 years we begin having a conversation about, depending on what we determine to do with the elementary schools, as to how far that rolls out. So we need to begin moving and having committees formed to start looking at that, and even finding the right architects or support mechanisms to work with us on that.
And anybody, I have one other question, I'm sorry, I made a note. And I don't see it in here, and I'm probably missing it, but are we going to add the testing coordinator back?
That's in the current budget.
That is in our current, so will that move forward for next year as well?
That's a goal for us, yes.
What about the reading and math specialists? Are we going to revisit that for this year?
There's still those components that are in the current budget that we have, we just haven't been able to fill them.
So those monies are still in this current budget?
Well, the reading specialist actually took the place of one of the newer teachers.
I can't hear.
One of the newer teachers.
No, I'm sorry.
The reading specialist actually was taking the place, I used that salary to cover one of the new teachers we brought on board, which would probably be the Parkview High School English teacher.
All right, so I guess my question would be, are we going to replace that back in this budget? Are we going to be looking at moving forward for next year?
I would assume if they're looking at any openings, that we have teachers that are resigning or retiring, that we don't have to replace, then that would be one of the ways they do that.
One of the things that we're having to do as we look forward, again, is looking at where we have really, really small classes and preparing the principals and the others to say, what is our ratio? We don't want to go over 25-1, but we've got classes now that are 12 and 13. And so we've got to take a strong look at that and see what we have to be able to come back and put some of these positions back in place.
Okay. Any other, I'm sorry, Ms. Garner?
When you're talking about elementary schools, are you considering combining any elementary schools, or still having one in Chase City, one in Clarksville?
We have not had any conversation about combining any schools, and
Okay.
I would not recommend that.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. And the other question went right over mine.
Maybe
It'll come
Mr.
back.
Palmer got it.
Oh, I know.
I've got it.
One other question that comes up every year. Out of school, out of county, out of zone students.
Yes, ma'am?
We always get hit right at the last minute finding out that we need a new teacher. How long can we wait before we accept any out of county, out of zone student?
Well, what we have, after the last 2 years dealing with lacrosse,
Yes. That's the major one.
I have said to both South Hill and lacrosse principals, and to Ms. Giammattio, because she works much with those requests, that Any requests for new students coming from out of county or out of zone to La Crosse will not be accepted. They could be accepted at South Hill if they're willing to go that far.
So not accepted at La
Not
Crosse.
accepted at
But
La
we're
Crosse.
talking about new
We're talking about
students,
new students.
The
yes.
ones that-
We've got ourselves in a position with the ones that are currently there.
and we can take care of those, but
Well,
no.
I mean, we're going to continue to have to monitor that. I
Yeah.
mean, we may be in a position to say that if you've got a new student coming in, then the student that you, well, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that whole process, but we know we don't want to be taking new students in that are from out of zone. And we're going to have to watch those that move in, because many of those that we've had that conversation with have said, I'm moving to La Crosse, and then we don't have an option.
Some already have.
So I anticipate actually coming up, Mr. Jeffers and myself have had a conversation with Mr. Mayhew about looking at some areas, bus area of La Crosse, and perhaps rezoning some students in an area to go to South Hill from La Crosse. I mean, that's the only school that we have growing, and we have no real options other than, we have let Head Start know that we're taking that classroom back. They're going to have to move somewhere else for next year. But we're just going to have to monitor it and see, and short of anything else, I don't know any other options but to maybe look to rezone an area.
How do you verify a student is supposed to come to our schools?
You don't.
I mean,
You're talking about whether they actually live with us or not?
yes.
They are supposed, well, Ms. Giammattio has her hand up, so I'll let her answer the question.
Ms. Giammattio, the floor is yours.
We have a verification of address
How?
form. They have to bring in a valid photo ID with the current resident. They have to bring in a real estate tax bill or a rental agreement. They have to bring in 2 months' worth of utility bills and 2 months' worth of bank bills, and they all have to have the address on it that they say they're living.
If I have a house in Chase City that I'm paying electric, water, and town taxes on,
It
and I
also-
don't live there,
Right, it also says it has to be the primary residence.
how you gonna know?
We won't know unless we do a home visit, and on the forms it says we have the right to do a home visit if somebody says.
Because I have people living in my rental property that I pay the
Yes.
electricity, and I pay the water bills, and they've just leased from me. And they
But you
are
have a
people-
lease agreement, correct?
But yes, but they are like people from Microsoft that are going to be here on a 3 to 5 year basis. So
Sure.
they don't want to buy anything, and everything's incorporated into one.
Right, and then
So-
they can provide the lease
The lease
agreement.
agreement's all in
Mhm,
there.
And then I'm sure they would have a bank account with an address on it.
Probably,
Or
yeah.
they
No,
have
they
to
do everything.
register their vehicles.
They don't have paper, they don't do paper at Microsoft.
Yeah, but they can provide something.
something.
And, you know, it's the law in Virginia that if they're here for more than 30 days, they do have to change their driver's license. And we do give them 30 days to do that. So, I mean, we're not Nazis about it.
Now, this is our policy, right? It's a written policy?
It's on all the
Yes.
forms.
Okay.
It's on all the forms, and it does, we also included, because the input from the teacher or the principals was, they wanted more ability to verify. So we recreated the forms a couple years ago, and then we also added the fact that home visits were a potential. And so if we ever have a question, because we get mail that comes back to us, we will prompt for a home visit. And so we have rectified a lot of the situations. Now, if they have an address and they can provide all that stuff, then the only time we will ever really catch it is if someone says, hey, they're not really living there, or we get a note from Mr. Mayhew or Mrs. Connor, and they say, hey, we're not picking the kid up there, or his grandma's dropping him off every day. And then we will prompt a home visit. So
Any other board members
we are
have?
doing the best we can,
Yes.
but we're making them provide the documentation. You have to go through a lot of effort to get around all that.
And the principals have the right to just say no.
tougher to get in school than it is to vote in Virginia.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Any other board members have any other questions about our budget that is presented in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Palmer?
Athletic trainers, is that still in for the Eastern End? Is still in? We just can't find the person to go there. That's hard, that's bad. Okay, thank you.
Any other board members? All right, next item.
All right, next item is procedural manuals and employee manual presentation. All of you have a copy. They're very long documents. Ms. Alga and Mr. Jeffers have been working for quite a number of months on these, trying to make sure that we have appropriate procedures. They will not require a board vote, but we do want the board to look over these and bring items back to us that you have any concerns or questions about. So we're putting them on your docket tonight so that you can begin going through these and letting us know your thoughts as we come back for other meetings.
Okay.
Okay?
Any board members have any questions about employee procedural manual? And again, we'll have an opportunity to read over this.
Our goal is that this will save us some conflicts later on by saying these are the procedures that we want to put in place.
Mrs. Alger or Mr. Jeffers, would you all like to say anything about this? Okay, thank you.
All right, and the next item are the school board norms, and Mr. Chairman, I think that's something that you all.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And let me pull it up real quick while I've got them written down. Yes, Mrs. Garner and I met.
Don't ask, I don't remember.
We met
Last
again.
Friday.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We met again last Friday for another work session, a talking session. And as all of you are aware, last month we adopted our new school board norms. And there was a question about actions that would be taken if you were not following, or the board members were not following the proper procedure. And Mrs. Garner and I talked about this, and we will vote on these this evening, but you have them listed there in front of you. The first one would be a warning. The second would be a censure by the board.
Illegal.
The third would be removing you off of a committee for 6 months. And the fourth would be to remove you off of a committee for 12 months. Yes, sir.
The censure step, would that be voted on by the board?
Yes, sir. That would be,
That doesn't automatic, that would be a.
no, sir, that would be a call out. And Mrs. Garner and I also talked, and there was somebody asked a question today, and I hope I responded correctly, that who would implement this or who would call this out. And it would be a vote that we would vote on this evening. We would be by the board chair and also the parliamentarian, which is Mr. Allgood, who we voted on to do that. But in order for any of these to happen, it would be a vote by the board entirely. So yes, it wouldn't be one person saying, hey, you're not following the proper procedure. But if it came down to that, then the board would vote as a whole, and it would be the will of the board to do that. Yes, sir, Mr. Edwards.
Chairman, I have one objection. The word censure, if you'll read your school law book,
Yes, sir.
under section 22, I think it's point 2, it states specifically that a school board member cannot be censured.
That was my question. What's the definition of censure?
Doesn't make any difference. That's what the law says.
Yeah, I just don't know what that is.
I think it says you can be, there's another word, but you cannot censure a school board member in public.
I don't know what it's
Kind
censure
of like a
is.
gag order,
Right.
or you're not allowed to do something because.
I read it before I
they say
came
you
over here
can't
tonight,
do
matter of
this.
fact.
It's a slap on your hand of some type.
Yeah, and
That's
if
a
you
part
do
of
it in
full
public, you
definition.
open yourself up for a
That's what it
lawsuit.
says.
I can actually, if you censure me, or I censure, we censure one of these board members, they can actually take an attorney and sue you because it's in the law book that you cannot do that to a school.
Do you know what statute that is, Mr. Edwards?
2 point something. I just read it before I came over here tonight.
Okay, all right.
But I just think you ought to look at it.
Okay,
You know,
and again, I appreciate that, and I will look into that. And I guess,
There's another word, but it's not censure.
okay.
It's,
Well, I think maybe, Why don't,
Maybe
You
our
say
parliamentarian can
Probably the same
research
thing,
this.
Call it a reprimand or something.
Yeah.
yes. Mr. Allgood, if you would, since you're the parliamentarian, look up another definition for the word. And again, censure means to call you out in public, that you are not following the bylaws that you have adopted, whether it's any of us sitting on this board. That's what the word
It
means.
explains in detail
Yes, sir.
what you can and can't do under 22.2 of the law
Okay.
book.
All right?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I've done some lookings with, under parliamentary procedure. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know this for a fact, but I'm not so sure that we as a board, other than if it's a law that's been violated, a state law, that would constitute Mr. Edwards or myself being put off the board for something we did illegal.
We can't remove you from the
All
board.
you can do is,
I'm not so sure you can even do the point of censoring or taking them off of the committee. I don't think we have that authority.
I had a phone.
embarrass a man to quit, that's about all you can do.
You gotta do a lot to embarrass me.
Well, I was just gonna make an ass out of myself and go to violation 4 tonight, and then we just get this over with.
Mr. Allgood, I spoke with Elizabeth Ewing today, who is the legal attorney for the VSBA. She said, you all are making the rules, this board will vote on these rules, and it's up to us how we want to implement them.
Okay.
So that is the ruling, and then to go along with that, I also asked her for an explanation of what it means to be a board chair and what we need to do to hold ourselves to a higher standard. So in front of you this evening, I'd asked Mrs. Giammatteo to print off to you 22.1-253-13-5, standard number 5, quality of classroom instruction and in educational leadership. And in the state of Virginia, school board members fall under this category. Each of you are required by law to attend continuing ed at some point during the school year annually, whether it be a webinar, whether it be a conference or something. By law, each of us are required to attend continuing ed. If you are not fulfilling that as a school board person, it's not good. It doesn't look good in the public eye. I mean, again, this is what the VSBA is set up for. It's more than just going and playing golf and running and eating and staying in hotels. It's about developing and learning policy and procedure. So again, I just wanted you all to physically have a copy of this. She sent this to me, so I asked, again, Paula to submit it. So this evening, when we talk about school board norms, if we want to put this vote off this evening until Mr. Allgood can come up with a different terminology for that word, or we will remove that word totally.
Just vote for it. Pass it.
What's the will, and again, anybody else have any other discussion? Yes, sir, Mr. Ritchie.
I have a couple things. The one above that, expectations for participating in meetings and conferences. Is that?
Yes,
that
ma'am.
Our school board meetings?
No, sir.
So there's no requirement that I come to school board?
Well, I would just assume, since you're an elected official on the school board, that you would be required to come.
And then the other one is, you mentioned about, in the last meeting, somewhere along the line, about the committees meeting between every meeting.
Right.
I think that could be a little excessive. I don't know if there's always a reason between every meeting to meet as a committee. So I don't know if we should be required to just convene a meeting just to say we did one.
Well, and again, that was not the sole purpose for bringing that up. I know the last 3 or 4 months that, before we switched over in January, every meeting, there was no report. That was about 4 months in a row. And again, while we're up here and with the paper sitting there and us being videoed, I'd like to show the public that we're doing our due diligence and following up. If we're on a committee, that we just don't say that we're on a committee just to be on one, that we're actually meeting and doing something and bringing information back to the board members who can't be on every committee. So that's why these committees were, put into place. So that would.
But saying to meet every month is kind of arbitrary. I mean, you could just as easily say meet every month, every other month.
Well, I mean,
minimum.
Or meet as necessary.
Yeah.
well, I mean, again,
I
Mr.
guess-
Allgood, I guess who would deem to be, you know, what's necessary.
I met with the committee with Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Dalton on safety. They brought me up to snuff on things I needed to know. They did a great job, but I don't see a need to meet every month on safety. I would think if Mr. Jefferson had an issue, or Mr. Dalton did, or I did, we'd get together and say, hey, we need to meet again.
Yeah.
Yes?
And, you know, some of our schedules are more difficult to if there's school personnel on these meetings, they want to meet during
Right.
their work hours. Well, those are also my work hours.
Right.
So I can't necessarily schedule, it's not that easy to schedule a meeting. I
Right.
don't know if you need to take me off some committees or not, but I don't know if I can commit. I mean, I don't mind doing the work, but I can't always commit to meeting every month. I don't.
Well, again, that will be up to the will of the board. If we want to, we can add that, Mrs. Giammatteo, to our board docs for Monday night about meeting schedules, and we'll put that up for a committee meeting, I'm sorry, yes, and decide where we want to go. Do we want to do it quarterly, or how that, wants to work out? But again, these committee structures have been in our board norms or our board docs for the last 4 years. And I just know that a lot of months it was no report, no report, no report. And it was about 4 or 5 month stretch there that we had no information to give anybody. What's that?
Maybe we have too many committees. So these committees are pretty new,
Right.
you know.
Well, I mean, these are the same ones that we've had since I've been on the board.
Right, but I think they're new because it came up when we had these committees that the rules actually said you were not, our policy manual said we would not have committees. And we had to change that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I think they were new
They
when
are.
we came on.
Right.
So,
Well, again, we will bring that up at our board meeting on Monday night and decide what we want to do from there.
well, if you're willing to say quarterly, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
more reasonable at a minimum. And maybe we could communicate whether or not we have a report before, so it's not in the agenda
Right.
every month.
Well, that's
So
what
we
I'm
don't have to
saying.
Call them all out and say no report.
Right, so again,
Just
if
call
we're-
those out that have a report.
And again, that'll be the will of the board, and if we have months where we don't have meetings, then we will exclude those from our agenda, and that may be, our meetings can move.
The board setting the agenda.
What's that?
That would be a part of the board setting.
Yes, board setting the agenda, correct.
Thank you.
All right.
One thing I wanted to ask, do the new members have school law books?
I'm in the process of ordering them.
I just want to point out that the statute says, shall participate in high-quality professional development programs on personnel, curriculum, and current issues in education. And I think that gives each board member some freedom in choosing what that professional development looks like. And it doesn't have to be a VSBA-sanctioned event.
Right.
It could be something that we have here for our board. It doesn't have to be VSBA, but certainly VSBA events are considered high-quality professional development. And it's something that we don't have to plan, and a lot of that is free. Those webinars
Yes.
that we can do at home.
In my pajamas?
Yeah, or, sweatpants or whatever it is they're
Right.
wearing. They are free. And so I guess I just want to point that out to many members who might have a job during the day and can't do that. You do have those opportunities to do those things. So, or if you're, maybe it would be that you read a book about what boardsmanship looks like.
I read that law book this afternoon.
And see, there you have it.
So, okay,
And
would you
so-
put that down, please, Mr.
So-
I read the law book this afternoon.
If you would make that report to the chairman, just so that we're all, just so that we're all in good standing. I think we all want to be in good standing. Amen? Can I just
Yes.
speak to say that? We all want to be in good standing.
And again, this was the sole source for creating these board norms, because again, I will go back and refer to the conversation that I had at our last board meeting, and I've been, victim to it. I think many of us have, but, the days of shenanigans and calling each other out, I mean, that's, again, we've got 2 new board members, and we're starting fresh, and we're moving forward, we're not looking in the review mirror, and again, that's why it's important for us to all follow the same procedure, and that's why we adopted this board norm.
So, before we move on then, are we removing, well, I don't know. Are we
I am going
planning
to, I am
remove
going
this
to.
from action, or?
I am going to remove the word censure, and,
I'll check.
and then Mr. Allgood will check. We can go back and add that again, like Mrs. Garner said. We can revisit these every 6 months, every year. They don't have to stay in place, they can change. But again, it keeps all of us on the same page.
We can move the vote, we can postpone the next meeting, right?
What's that?
Is that what you're saying, Wanda?
Well,
an
yeah,
action
because
item,
it's
we
an
can move-
action item tonight.
Well, when that comes up, we can make a motion to move it to
It's
the
Yeah.
only like
next
a
meeting.
week.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
a week.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes.
none of that needed.
Yes.
You know what I said? I would have liked this.
All right. Can I get a motion that the closed meeting be closed and the board certifies to the best of members' knowledge only business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting to which this certification applies, and only such business matters as were identified in the motion concerning the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered?
So moved.
I have a motion from Mr. Palmer,
Second.
second from Ms. Garner. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Allgood?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
No.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes. Moving on to our action item, can I get a motion that we postpone our personnel item?
So moved.
I
Second.
have a motion from Mrs. Garner, a second from Mrs. Smith. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Allgood?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes. Can I get a motion that we postpone disciplinary actions, I guess would be the appropriate word for our school board norms? Could I get a motion that we postpone that until our meeting on Monday,
So moved.
Tuesday?
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Allgood, a second from Mr. Ritchie. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Allgood?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes. We amended the agenda at the beginning of the meeting to vote as an action item on, what was the appropriate word?
Need my
Need my transcripts. So can I get a motion that we approve the adoption of Need my transcripts?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion from Mrs. Garner, a second from Mrs. Bailey. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Allgood?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes, can I get a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.